Squirting. What is it really? You've probably heard people argue about it. Some say it's just urine, others claim it's something completely different, and many people are left confused about what's actually happening. So let's clear it up. Squirting refers to the release of a noticeable amount of fluid from the urethra, the same opening where urine exits the body, typically during intense sexual arousal or orgasm. What makes it stand out is the volume and appearance of the fluid. It's usually clear, watery, and doesn't have a strong odor. But before jumping to conclusions about what it is, it's important to understand that squirting is not the same as every other type of fluid release that can happen during arousal. There are actually a few different things going on in the body during sexual stimulation. For example, the body naturally produces lubrication through the vaginal walls. This is a normal response to arousal and helps reduce friction. Then there's something called female ejaculation, which is a smaller amount of fluid, often thicker or milky, that comes from specific glands. And then there's squirting, which tends to involve a larger volume of fluid and feels more forceful. Because these are often grouped together, it creates confusion. People assume they're all the same thing, but they're not. To really understand squirting, we need to look at the anatomy involved. Because once you understand how the body is structured, the mystery starts to fade. To understand squirting, we need to look at three important parts of the body. First is the urethra. This is the tube that carries urine from the bladder out of the body. It sits just above the vaginal opening and plays a central role in where the fluid exits. Next are the Skene's glands. These are small structures located near the urethra. You can think of them as the female counterpart to the male prostate. In fact, they develop from the same tissue during early development, which is why they share some similarities in function. These glands produce a small amount of fluid, and interestingly, that fluid contains markers also found in male prostate fluid. This is one reason why scientists believe they contribute to what's known as female ejaculation. The third key structure is the clitoris. While many people think of it as just a small external organ, it's actually much larger internally. It extends into the pelvis and surrounds the vaginal area in a way that allows it to play a major role in sexual response. It's also the primary source of pleasure-related stimulation for many women. During arousal, blood flow increases to this area, causing swelling and heightened sensitivity. Now here's where things connect. As arousal builds, these structures become more active. The glands may release small amounts of fluid, and pressure builds within the pelvic region. During orgasm, muscle contractions occur, particularly in the pelvic floor. These contractions can create enough force to push fluid outward through the urethra. But this leads to the big question: where does the larger volume of fluid come from? Because the glands alone are quite small and unlikely to produce that much on their own. That brings us to the next part: what science says about the actual composition of this fluid. This is where things get interesting. When scientists analyzed the fluid released during squirting, they found something unexpected. In many cases, the fluid contained small amounts of substances typically found in urine, but in much lower concentrations. At the same time, it also contained markers linked to the Skene's glands. So what does that mean? It suggests that squirting isn't purely one thing. Instead, it appears to be a combination. Part of the fluid likely comes from the bladder, while another part comes from the glands near the urethra. But here's the key difference. The fluid is much more diluted than normal urine. It's usually clearer, less concentrated, and doesn't have the same smell. Some studies have even shown that the bladder fills slightly during arousal, even if it was emptied beforehand. This could explain how fluid is available for release during orgasm. Other experiments have used imaging techniques to observe the bladder before and after squirting, showing that the fluid inside decreases afterward. That's strong evidence that the bladder is involved. However, this doesn't mean squirting is simply urinating, because the process, timing, and composition are different. It's happening in response to sexual stimulation, involves different pressures and muscle contractions, and includes contributions from other glands. There are also individuals who report completely different experiences, some noticing changes in color when taking certain medications, others reporting no change at all. This suggests there's variation from person to person, so rather than trying to label it as one thing or another, it's more accurate to see it as a unique physiological response. So what's the final answer? Is squirting urine? Not exactly. Does it involve the bladder? In many cases, yes, but it's not the same as typical urination, and it's not solely coming from one source. The best way to understand it is as a mixed fluid response, something that involves both the bladder and nearby glands, triggered by sexual arousal and physical stimulation. And here's the most important part. It's completely normal. Some people experience it, others don't. Neither is better or worse. It's just a variation in how different bodies respond. There's no requirement to make it happen, and there's no reason to feel concerned if it doesn't. What matters far more is comfort, communication, and understanding your own body. Because focusing too much on one specific outcome can actually take away from the overall experience. If it happens naturally, that's fine. If it doesn't, that's equally fine. There's also no need to feel embarrassed about it. A lot of the confusion around squirting comes from misinformation and unrealistic expectations. But when you look at the science, it becomes much less mysterious. At the end of the day, it's just another example of how complex and varied the human body can be. And understanding that can help remove unnecessary pressure and replace it with confidence, because knowing what's actually happening allows you to approach it with clarity instead of confusion.